All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. So everyone, good evening. My name is Vanessa Martinez. I am a mother against Greg Abbott in San Antonio, Texas. I am representing Mothers Against Greg Abbott in this evening, and we hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. So tonight we have Stackpack, a student organization looking to encourage youth to own their power as a voting bloc, one campus at a time. They are a national organization focused on 18 states coming in 2022. Texas is one of those states, and we are looking forward to hearing their strategy around turning the youth vote out here in Texas so that we can fire Greg Abbott and his cohorts. So tonight with us, we've got Jordan Harzinski. He's the founder of Stackpack and currently a sophomore at George Washington University. After starting a Students for Biden/Harris group on his campus and helping several campaigns leading up to the 2020 election, Jordan recognized the importance of youth engagement for the Democratic victories and wanted to do more. Also with us is Pramila Bartholomew, senior advisor to Stackpack, who has helped to build the organization, its strategic plan, and has the tactical strategies that Stackpack has been setting in place. Pramila has also helped to oversee overall operations at Stackpack. She spent the last 20 years in the tech industry and finance and business operations, and her involvement in the 2008 presidential election, which had her crisscrossing the country, led her to continue to stay civically engaged at the local, state, and national levels. Pramila has served on the 2008 DNC Platform Committee, held leadership roles in California at the county and state party level, and served on the DNC National Finance Committee. Today, she leads her consulting firm, Tactical Strategies, LLC. Finally, Stackpack's student moderator for this event is Ethan Choi, who is currently a freshman at Claremont McKenna College. Ethan has worked under Pramila since his junior year in high school as a digital and media director for various initiatives, is helping to raise funds for the Democratic Party and for Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight Action Organization. Ethan continues to work with Pramila in supporting Stackpack that have included designing the Stackpack website and creating digital content. Ethan will moderate the first half of this event to help us learn about Stackpack as an organization and their strategy in Texas. I'll jump in based on questions that I see in the Q&A, and I'll also manage the Q&A section to make sure that your questions are addressed. Ethan, I'm going to let you take it from here. Thank you all again for joining us. And after we finish this part, then I'll go ahead and go on with the Q&A. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for the kind introductions, Vanessa, and a special thank you to you for hosting tonight, to Nancy Thompson, and to the Mothers Against Greg Abbott group for inviting Stackpack to share their planned efforts in Texas. So what Stackpack is planning for Texas applies to other states as well, and so let's dive right in with a question for Jordan. We know the student vote made a huge difference in 2020 across the country and in many states. How did students do in Texas, Jordan?
Well, Ethan, thank you for that question. And as we dove into our research, we encountered the data published by Tufts University showing that in 2020, of the 1.6 million students in Texas, nearly 1 million students did not cast a ballot. So Democrats lost Texas that year by the closest margin since 1992. Based on the voter data that showed students trending Democrat, we could have flipped Texas blue in 2020, had more students been mobilized. And this was the case in countless key states, as you mentioned before, across the country. So let's take a look at the data and see how tight the races really were and where the student impact would have had the most. Next slide, please. Okay, as this table shows, President Biden eked out extremely slim margins of victory in Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and would have lost all three states had not enough students turned out to vote. What this also shows is the opportunity we could have had to flip Texas, North Carolina, and even Florida. This slide shows how many students didn't vote. That is what Stackpack is focused on right now. We're mobilizing not only those who did vote last time, but those who did not even show up. So if we're able to make the necessary investments in Texas and other states that tell the same story, it will have a powerful impact in 2022 and beyond for Democrats.
Wow, okay. So I want to turn to you, Pramila, as someone who who has built out the strategy for Stackpack. Where will you start and what will Stackpack's overall approach be?
Sure. Thanks, Ethan. Yes, this was really interesting. So we started with the 13 swing states that were identified in 2020. And really briefly, Vanessa, could you just go to the next slide and you'll see the 18 target states that are there, just for a split second. And then, so in addition to these, the 13 swing states, we added the additional 5. We took a step back and said, okay, what are some other factors that we should be considering? So for example, in Maryland, we have 2 Senate Democrats, Senator Van Hollen and Senator Cardin, but a Republican governor. And in Massachusetts, we have Senator Warren and Senator Markey, but yet a Republican governor. Massachusetts has many, many colleges that we should be engaging in order to secure a trifecta in state government. So we added Missouri largely due to the critical Senate race there. And then similarly in Vermont, we have Senator Sanders and Senator Leahy, but with a Republican governor. So we determined that Vermont being a state that we would focus on in 2020 prior to Senator Leahy announcing his retirement, anticipating it was a possibility. And so of course, Virginia was a bit of a nail biter in 2016. And so, and since then also the State House has hung on the balance over the years. And then we knew that we needed to help build out there. And then of course, the urgency has only been amplified following the last month's election. And what's tragic actually is that only 25% of students voted in Virginia in this election. Stackpack did encourage campaigns to talk to students, visit campuses, and listen to their concerns with little success. And that's something that I want to say we don't want other states to make the mistake of. And we'll be reaching out to candidates and expecting that they are going to want to listen to what students have to say. So having identified these states, we began the research to establish what is that strategy going to be. So we know what the 18 states are. Let's now delve into what are the swing districts within those states. And then of course, onto the schools. What are the schools that are located in those swing districts? And of course, in addition to that, recognizing the importance of rural communities, we identified local schools within those rural communities. For example, in Texas, we researched close to 60 rural counties. And we're in full outreach mode and believe that with this strategy, we'll be able to maximize the student voter turnout.
Thank you, Pramila. That's great and it makes a lot of sense. Turning to Jordan now, Stackpack's mission is to elect Democrats because of how their policy positions best align with the issues that a majority of students care about. Can you briefly share a bit about how you plan to organize on campuses and your plan to mobilize students?
Yeah, sure. You're absolutely right that we're looking to elect candidates who will address our priorities as students, but there's a bit more to that. We'd like candidates to proactively reach out to us and ask us what's important to us as students. Our votes need to be earned, and that means engaging with us. Open invitation for Beto and other statewide candidates, as well as congressional and state legislatures and local candidates to reach out. We're already finding ways to help, and we want to be long-term partners in building out solutions, and we can't just be targeted in early election years. As to how we'll organize and mobilize at Stackpack, we'll focus on registering our fellow students, mobilizing them to get out the vote, and then advocating for our issues. So we have 12 issue platforms that are on our website at stackpack.org. And I can briefly walk you through what a Stackpack chapter would look like without getting into a lot of detail. So we're looking to build out a team of 10 campus leaders, and each of them will have different roles and responsibilities to ensure that the burden of time doesn't just rest on a few. And as students, we're juggling a lot, and we want to respect everybody's time limitations while achieving our common goals. It's how we also hope to amplify our message and our impact. So to achieve these goals, we're building a network of coalition partners at colleges, universities, and high schools around the country, starting in Texas, to impact local races, expand our majorities in Congress, and to flip critical governorships like the one in Texas.
Thank you, Jordan. That's fantastic. And as students, we all have limited time, but this is important work and we each have to do our part. So, Pramila, I know you've talked with me about the importance of civic engagement in Stackpack's strategy. Could you share your perspective on that and how that plays into sustaining student engagement in the long run?
Sure, absolutely. So as part of our original strategy, as we identified those 12 key issues, and noting, as Jordan had already mentioned, that we have an issues page on the Stackpack website that lays them all out, but in a take action kind of way. So some of these priority issues: education, Title IX protections, climate crisis, voter protection, mental health, and equality. And of course, as it relates to people of color, the LGBTQ community, indigenous communities, as it relates to women and what we're dealing with right now, with the right to choose being threatened right now, and social, racial, and economic, environmental justice, with diversity and inclusion front and center. So how we're going to tackle these issues is starting at the campus level. So what we're going to try to do is encourage students to actually take up these issues at their very own campus. For example, the Title IX protections. Currently, there are guidelines, Title IX guidelines established at the federal level, but there's really no accountability and no audits to actually, as a requirement to ensure that compliance is there with these guidelines. So our students will advocate for transparency at their schools. So in the last couple of weeks, we've heard what happened at Little Elm High School and the protests around sexual assault reports and how they were handled by school administrators. Days later, in Oakland High School in my home state of California, they held a walkout because of pervasive sexual assault on their campuses and what little was done about that. And you would have also heard about the recent case in New York, where a student who pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting 4 girls during high school years got probation for 8 years instead of 8 years of jail time. And so there's targeting of LGBTQ students. Recently, right there in Texas, Children's Medical Center in Dallas dissolved a healthcare program for transgender kids after becoming a target of conservative criticism. So caring for our children shouldn't be a partisan issue. So how will campuses address the impacts that overflow into their responsibility, because this is unacceptable? The climate crisis. Students can look into sustainability practices at their own campuses. How is their Office of Sustainability, if it even exists, is doing on your campus, and what you can do as individuals for a sustainable future? And then mental health. Does your campus offer adequate mental health services? If not, they'll be advocating for those services. And then the fourth point I wanted to make is about voter protection. Schools don't have a practice of making voter resources available, for example, on their school website for easy access. We've tackled that for the 18 states, and it's very clearly laid out what the obstacles are to students in Texas and in other states. So we hope that that'll be a good resource. But schools have a responsibility, and we want students to hold them accountable.
That's fantastic. And one of the things that differentiates Stackpack from other organizations is that your efforts, like Jordan just touched on, are not cyclical. Could you elaborate more on that, Pramila, and how that plays into sustaining long-term student engagement? What is Stackpack's overarching strategy to turn out the vote?
I'm glad you asked, because I did want to talk about that as well. So one of our priorities is to lay the groundwork for a new generation of students to become leaders and become informed citizens by providing them with opportunities to engage on policy issues that they care about. So we'll be organizing semi-monthly forums with speakers that bring expertise in these areas. For example, each month we'll cover various aspects of climate and sustainability in order to provide full context for what it means to reach net zero. We cover topics such as plastics, recycling, zero waste, water preservation, the path to 100% renewables, electrifying transportation, environment and sustainability. The plan is to mobilize students around these issues, which are nonpartisan, and to facilitate dialogue and empower them to remain informed and become invested lifelong voters. But I think this whole strategy also plays into how do we actually come together instead of on polar opposites and fighting based on certain taglines that we've associated with something or some issue. And I think it's really important to have the conversations. And I think that focusing on issues is what's going to bring students together across party lines because they are nonpartisan. And so, after all, this is what motivates all of us as citizens to turn out to the polls. And so in the process, Stackpack strategy creates a wave of new leaders that are engaged and informed. I believe that'll make a big difference in how we are able to keep them engaged. I think that's a big part of it, is having them fight for these issues, understand them, and have lengthy discussions around them and bring them together, because at the end of the day, when they're actively engaged in these activities, they're already together and can be mobilized much more easily than remaining in silos and having all kinds of organizations running in at the last minute and trying to get out the vote. It shouldn't be like that. It should be ongoing engagement. And I think that'll make a huge difference.
Well, speaking of students, we have many joining us today on this call. Jordan, can you give us a sense of what their experience will be like if they join Stackpack?
Yeah, and that's something Pramila knows that I love talking a lot about. So I briefly mentioned earlier how we plan to organize teams on campus. It's about the 10 student leaders I talked about earlier, but we'd be helping with planning voter registration drives, coordinating campus and national level events, and organizing conferences, all of which creates the experiences that facilitate learning and empowering our students to ensure that they have a rewarding experience. And I think that's what's most exciting about this national network that we talked and that we will all have upon graduating from college or high school, and the impact that we'll make together, and understanding that we as students are one of the most powerful voting blocs. I think that's what's really important.
Absolutely. And what can Stackpack do for parents who are seeking to encourage their kids to get involved? Pramila, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So I would say, please have them visit our Join Us page at the stackpack.org website. That's basically what would happen is, as soon as they put in basic information, we would reach out to them and have a chat. Do you have 1 hour, or do you want to be a leader on campus? I mean, and what's the in between? So let them know what the opportunities are, because this is not the time to step back. And we want them to engage, and we want them to follow Stackpack and amplify the message of the day. And there's so many of them. And so I think that in itself, if the student doesn't have time to do anything, if they can log on and check things out, they'll get the latest issue of the day that they can amplify, and that'll make a huge difference. And so that shouldn't be underestimated. So I would say, as mothers and others, talk to the youth in your lives and let them know how much impact they can have just by spending 3 minutes a day. Number two, we can always use the help of parents highlighting where the voter resources are to their kids. So I get asked this a lot. My child is in such and such a state. I want them to vote. I want to make sure that they have all the information. Well, we're going to have information on the website that is very granular, but also just exactly what they need. As voter registration, the laws and the voter suppression laws, there's still going to be more activity throughout the year. So we're going to be staying on top of that. And so they will always know what they can and can't do, what they need to do in terms of bringing in voter IDs. So Stackpack would be a great resource as a website for students, because we have a section in each state that actually says what's the impact to you. And so we want them to know about that. And then students involved with Stackpack will work proactively with their college administration to ensure that their voter resources are made available, as I mentioned earlier, in their communities. So everyone should be given the resources to vote, and college administrators must play an active role in disseminating that important information to ensure equal access among students.
That sounds great. And before we jump into the Q&A that Vanessa will be moderating, I want to give you both an opportunity for any closing remarks in case there was something we didn't cover. Jordan, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I'll just say, Pramila, I'm going to steal your line, mothers and others. If you have any student in your life encourage them to join us. They can go to our website at stackpack.org to join us, have them fill out the form, and like Pramila said, we'll be in touch with them. We need all hands on deck to fire Greg Abbott, and we encourage you to stay engaged in every group and every club that you're currently involved in. But independently, you or any student that you know may join us independently and become a member to help amplify our collective message. We need to get loud to get our point across. If we're not loud, then we get dismissed. And we saw that in Virginia, and we cannot let that happen again because our votes matter.
And Pramila, final thoughts?
Well, I wanted to say a few thank yous here. I wanted to take a minute to say what a driven, passionate, and committed young man Jordan is. It's not easy as a sophomore in college to juggle as much as you have since we started this journey in May. And to weather building an organization from ground up as complex as Stackpack is really admirable. And a lot of research went into getting this set up and a lot of outreach to students nationally. And the amount of research that went into building out where we needed to be and to actually have the resources to do the outreach has been phenomenal. I want to also thank Suzanne Lawrence, how she goes on Facebook here, for inviting me to join this group, Mothers Against Greg Abbott, because my history with Texas organizing started in 2008 when I was there and the Texas two-step was still in play. I have friends and family in Austin, Dallas, and Houston. So I feel fortunate and I feel very connected to Texas in this way. And Vanessa, quick thanks for hosting us today. Nancy, I know that you're on and off calls right now, but I just wanted to say you've been with us from the time we started work in Texas. And as a fellow organizer, I just want to say you're one of the best things that's happened to Texas in a while. So this is such a passionate and committed bunch of mothers and others, and we thank you for having us. And in return, we'll help you fire Greg Abbott. And I want to also say, Ethan, in the introduction, we've talked about how we've collaborated since you were a junior in high school, and you have contributed so much to where we are today. And I just wanted to say, I love working with you. Amazing job creating the design for the website and spending hours working with me to provide the resources that students are going to need. So I think I'd like to throw this back at you and say, if you'd like to share a few thoughts before Vanessa jumps in with Q&A, please take a couple seconds to do that.
Sure, and thank you, Pramila. You know, it's been an incredibly rewarding experience to work with you and to get an inside look at all the amazing work that you and Jordan are doing building out Stackpack. I think we've seen here today how important the student vote is to winning future elections, and I'm excited to be a part of an organization like Stackpack that's going to tap into the student vote and empower students like me across the country.
Vanessa,
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the Q&A. Thank you guys for that wealth of information. I feel like we have learned so much in the last 25-30 minutes, and I feel like you guys were so prepared. This information is definitely critical to Texas, right? And getting as many students as we can engaged in Texas is a huge need. The more voters we have in Texas, the better. And, you know, when we deal with the apathy and the lack of knowledge when it comes to voter registration, those things all have a huge impact. So thank you guys again for the information that you guys have brought today. If anyone has a question, please feel free to raise your hand. I can go ahead and unmute you, and then you can ask directly to the group. I see that there are no questions in the chat section at the moment. So if anyone has a question, feel free to raise your hand and I will go ahead and allow you to ask.
And really quickly, Vanessa, if you can jump to the next slide, that's
Sure.
got the Stackpack's website and our contact information. You can find us on
Did it go too many?
Instagram
No,
and Twitter.
there
I
it
think
goes.
it's at the end, just in
Oh,
case
okay.
they have a question later on
Right here.
and want to find a way to contact. Absolutely reach out to those means as well.
Perfect. So since there are no questions right now, I'll have a question. You guys were talking about organization and what students could do. If there are other people in academia, professors, anybody else that might want to engage Stackpack, what could they do to maybe champion an effort in a school in Texas?
Well, depending on what department they're in too. I mean, we would love to have folks, participate in some of our forums, as whether it's they're in the policy area. And I mean, we would welcome them to, to reach out to us and see if there's a topic that they know students are interested in or work that they're working on. And we would love to actually organize something around that. Jordan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think in addition to that, even just encouraging their students to join us, send them to our website, let them read about what Stackpack's about, and yeah, get them to join.
Ethan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to echo what Pramila and Jordan have said. They have such an amazing vision for this organization, and they're a powerhouse, and they're going to really make an impact in elections going forward. And they're going to do the outreach, and they need the support from students. This is a fantastic opportunity for students to find a way to really make our voices heard in elections and get the issues that we care about enacted.
Thank you, guys. So we do have a question from Chris Luring. Are there any specific messaging, policies, or strategies that Stackpack focuses on in getting students involved in more conservative and rural states such as Missouri and Iowa, where cynicism abounds?
Jordan, you want to take that with the research that we've done in rural communities, how we're going to try to tackle that and include them in conversations?
Yeah, so we've done the research for Iowa and Missouri. So thanks for bringing that up. But I think Texas is also important too. We've seen a lot of, we're trying to build bonds with students there, and we're trying to hear the first thing that students do when we bring them on board is we ask them what they care about most. So understanding where students in more conservative areas, as you mentioned, understanding what is most important to them will serve to us as a guide on what we should be communicating, what we should be doing there to bring them in and to say that we are going to elect leaders who are going to fight for those issues. I know a big thing in rural America is probably economic equality for all. So we were focusing on that as well. So really hearing these students out, seeing what their top issues are, and creating a plan with them, with the campus leaders, to execute that on their campus, and especially at community colleges too. So there's a lot of community colleges in rural Iowa, as we've looked at in the past, and a lot in rural Texas. So really talking to those students and not leaving anybody behind is how we're going to bring everybody into the conversation, whether you're a conservative or you're an independent, anything that you are. We want to hear what's important to you, and we want to talk to you about that issue and see how we can make that go into action as part of the student agenda.
And if I could add to that too, because that's exactly right. What we want to make sure is, we talked earlier about having candidates actually contact us and give us an opportunity to engage other students to actually we would be the conduit in some sense to be able to say, this is what's important to them, and have the students be able to actually converse directly with these leaders who are seeking their vote. And I think that's one way to build folks, build some impact into this and give students a voice, which I feel we don't do enough of. Their votes, we talk about how important the student vote is, but the outreach to students and asking them what they care about is lacking. And I think we need to change that. And so to any candidates out there, be interested in the student with issues and what they have to say, because that is going to make the difference. Because I will tell you, in 2022, it's going to be a pretty dismal result if we keep ignoring different demographics. They all matter. I want to add one more thing. Is there another question? If there's another question, because I was just thinking of something else that has been on my mind today in a conversation that I had with a student in Ohio. And they were commenting about how there's more mobilization within Republican clubs, student clubs, than there is with Dem clubs. They're having a real tough time with Dem clubs on campuses mobilizing. That's very distressing. And I think that we need to think long and hard about what that means and invest in efforts like ours to make sure we have what we need to be able to do the level of outreach we need to do to have, to be successful.
Thank you, guys. We don't have any other questions from the audience, but I did have another question. So many of the people on here are also parents, and we know we talked about parents being specific, guiders, kind of the people that are guiding our youth, and somebody who has college-age children. What are some steps that you think that we could take as parents to get our children engaged in the process and get them engaged with Stackpack? What are some ideas or some tips that you guys have to help that process as parents and grandparents?
Pramila, would you like to speak to this first?
Oh, I was going to pitch it over to you, but I think it goes back to, we can answer all those questions and get them engaged. We just need them to go to stackpack.org and fill out the Join Us. All it asks is what college campus they're affiliated with and their contact information so that we can reach out to them. And we can go through in detail how, based on what they have in terms of time, and get them involved. And I think what's the most exciting about all of this is also what Jordan had mentioned earlier, and that is what groups are doing in silos. They're making a huge impact, and they should continue to do that. However, if they have one arm over on this side too, that engages with organizations like ours, it's a national network. So if you're working on a particular issue, then you could be working on that same issue with other people working on the same issue, and actually, be more productive. And you're first of all, anything that when you're talking to folks in a different state, I mean, the perspectives are so amazing. And so what you want is getting exposure to that kind of thing. And we talked earlier, Jordan, you mentioned this earlier about what happens at the end of like a year stint working with Stackpack, or after a couple of years. The network you build nationally that's tied to issues and the relationships you build is something that you're going to take for a lifetime. And there's no other organization that does that. There are organizations that do student-to-student outreach, and we would love to partner with them. I have to say, we're not running into a lot of them right now. Again, probably later on, but there's not a lot of activity. That's concerning, but looking to collaborate, but at the same time, investing in these students. And quite honestly, by the kinds of things that we're working on, they're going to learn more than they would otherwise. They would still do the canvassing, they would still do the phone banking. We need to get our candidates elected, but there's so much more to that, because when you're tied to issues, and fighting for issues and working with policy experts to craft policy plans, and taking that one step further and working with other experts that are going to say, okay, how do you convert that to legislation, laws that you can actually advocate for yourself? We have that kind of a network in order to be able to offer that kind of thing to students, which I think would be, whether you're a poli-sci major or not, quite honestly, I encourage you, if you want to do poli-sci, do it as a minor, do something else, because there's so much. That's one of the problems we have in government today. We don't have diversity in experience and skill set and all of that kind of stuff. And we want to, have a landscape and individuals that provide different perspectives, life experiences, as well as, the skill set and experience that they bring to the table. So I couldn't help myself there, because I just ran into a mom who said that her daughter wanted to do engineering, and that she happened to volunteer for a state assembly member. And she's decided, well, maybe I won't do engineering, maybe I'll just go into political science. I'm like, no, tell your daughter to do engineering and political science. So anyway, that's a mom speaking here, and also someone who's seen the deficiencies in government we have today and saying we need to do better. So go out there and kill it. And whatever you choose to do, don't think you can't do it, because you can still do all of this and run for office with any degree that you have, and you'll bring more to the table. So that's my pitch, mom, to mothers and others.
Yeah, and for a student perspective here, I think that for me, experience is gold, especially when it comes to, talking about these issues like that. And when we bring in these policy experts, we're going to get hands-on experience that you can't learn in a textbook all the time. And I think having that national network, like Pramila talked about, and having these hands-on experiences, it's something that I wish I had in high school. And, last year when I was doing organizing, it's these kind of things that's going to make us, better thinkers, better learners, and it's going to have us be able to talk about these, these 12 important issues. And as Pramila said, once we know about these issues, then we can educate others and make sure that everybody knows what's at stake in elections now, and how we can make this change on the national level, the state level, the local level, but most importantly, even at the college level, because a lot of schools sometimes don't have like a sustainability, office. And that stuff's important if we want to combat climate change. And that's what's important to students these days, especially. So I think that's what's really important, is getting that hands-on experience and listening to these leaders and be able to talk and share our experiences with other students.
Thank you, guys. Another question that I was thinking about is that you guys mentioned something that we at Mothers Against Greg Abbott have been very concerned with, and that's the rural vote, right? And so rural Texas is critical, is essential. Getting rural Texan voters out to the polls in 2022 is really going to, along with, the rest of us, is going to take it's a make or break. Those rural voters are extremely important to us, and making sure that we reach out to as many rural people as possible so that they become voters and that they actually get to the polls. That's a huge like block that we've been thinking about. It's a hurdle. What I think about where I live, and there are maybe 2 or 3 rural colleges around me. What can we do, even if we aren't students, that can maybe help with that, reach out at those rural schools that may not have somebody who knows about Stackpack? What can we do to try to get that word out?
Yeah, so like you said, you have 2 rural schools in your area. I mean, if you don't know any students, like we talked about earlier, talking about to some professors, if you may know them. But if you don't know anybody, it may be best if you want to talk to Pramila or I to go out on that campus for maybe a couple hours and stand somewhere and try to promote Stackpack, talk to students about it. If there's other high schoolers, we talked to some in Virginia who are willing to go out to some community colleges and just see if these students are registered to vote. So just getting some volunteers in that area, they don't have to always be college students, but then, you know, representing Stackpack at that college and getting those at the college involved, especially at community colleges. I know there's a lot in rural Texas, and really trying to build out student leaders there with other people in the community.
And the same parents that are there, they don't really know the students there. In the immediate term, sending them out and letting them know, equipping them with how do you go about doing this if they've never done it before, which is often the case. And we can very well, you know, talk to them about how to go to a campus and what resources they need, materials that they need to take with them, where they can get it. We can try to coordinate getting it to them and things like that so that they can actually go and take a stab at registering students. But while they're doing that, talking about Stackpack and saying, have you thought about getting more involved? So that would be immensely helpful both ways.
Thank you, guys. So I think that we've had a really good discussion here, and I appreciate the time that you guys have given us today. Pramila, Jordan, Ethan, and I'm only giving you in that order because those are how your windows are coming up. Do you have any closing statements? Jordan, we'll go with you first. Do you have any closing statements that you'd like to give at this moment?
Yes. First off, I'd like to thank Mothers Against Greg Abbott for hosting us and everybody here this evening. I hope that we can all work together to ensure that, one, we flip Texas blue, fire Greg Abbott, that we can expand our majorities in the House and the Senate, and even flip some local state houses and, you know, other governorships across the country. And the student vote is so important to me. I always felt so neglected when we were trying to organize things and it was just like, oh, you are students. So I really wanted to build an organization that left nobody behind, no student behind. And I hope and encourage everyone here tonight to talk to their friends about Stackpack, to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Stackpack, and, you know, share our content so that more people know that they have a place, if they're students, to have a voice and to, you know, help out, and let's win some elections. So thank you to Pramila and to Ethan and Vanessa. Thank you so much for hosting this tonight.
Vanessa, am I next? Is that the order? Is it okay?
Yes, thank you, Pramila. I'm sorry. It was odd. There's somebody who raised a hand and then dropped it. So yes, thank you.
Oh, no worries. Well, I think Jordan said it all. You know where to find us. We are so happy to have found you all. I think it's amazing the work that you're doing. It's one of the groups that's the most impactful that I've been a part of and seen over the years. And so, you know, kudos to all of you for doing as much as you are. But I will say, whether it's on the student side and following Stackpack, but the MAGA, you know, we follow, you know, Mothers Against Greg Abbott. And I think that if everyone helped by just doing a follow and liking and retweeting is immense. The impact that you can have within this group alone, and the attention that you'll get from candidates that will in turn, you'll be able to, you know, that's how we're going to win at the end of the day. And we'll get the right candidates winning. That's the other thing, because when they see how important a particular issue is and how you're fighting back, that's how you're going to, you know, engage more. So that applies to the Mothers Against Greg Abbott, every member. should spend 2 seconds every day just going on to Twitter or Instagram, seeing what's been posted, and amplify the message. And that's what we hope to do at Stackpack. So I say the same thing. Please follow Stackpack and help us also amplify our message. That's going to be really critical. So thank you.
Thank you. Ethan?
Well, I just want to thank Pramila and Jordan again for the opportunity to be here, and Vanessa, Nancy, and the Mothers Against Greg Abbott organization. Just, as somewhat of an outsider looking at the amazing work that Stackpack has done so far, I'm just excited to see what the future holds.
Thank you, Ethan. I want to thank you all again for taking this time tonight and joining us and explaining to us what Stackpack does, what it hopes to do, and how it plans on engaging our students. I am impressed by you all, and I thank you guys for devoting an hour to us. This is amazing work. Jordan, congratulations. Pramila, thank you so much for putting us in touch with Jordan and Ethan. And I want to just put our appreciation back. Having you guys join us tonight has been amazing, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and I may be driving out to some rural schools around me to make some contacts. But thank you guys so much. I like to think of a call to action at the end of all of our meetings, and so from what I hear from you all is that the biggest call to action here is becoming engaged with Stackpack by following and becoming a part of the Stackpack team. And so if all of us at Mothers Against Greg Abbott, all of us as part of this group, join and do what we can to keep the momentum of Stackpack going in Texas, we're all going to have a much better turnout on the polls and feel better, at least in knowing that we've done something for 2022. Thank you guys again. I hope you guys have an amazing evening. It has been great to speak with you. Once again, all I can say is I'm in awe. Thank you guys.
Thanks so much, everyone.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and end out this session. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out directly to Stackpack. If you've got a question for Mothers Against Greg Abbott, feel free to message us. We respond as quickly as we can. There's a few of us that are volunteers, but we get on it as quickly as we can. So feel free to reach out to us, and then make sure and follow Stackpack, become a part of Stackpack, and help the momentum. Thank you guys so much. Y'all have a great evening.